The SD Ruby podcast is brought to you by New Relic.
Hi, I'm Hueter, and I'm going to give you an introduction to Watir. A little bit about me. I'm a QA engineer, and my primary duty is to develop test automation for our client's management console. We deal with a recommendation engine. And to prove that Watir is language diagnostic, the app is written in .NET. I've been using Ruby and Watir for 3 years in order to do test automation. Today's talk, I'm just going to go through how to use Watir and give you and at the end do a short script example. I'm not going to go into how to incorporate it into a test framework. So, what is Watir? It stands for Web Application Testing in Ruby. It's a browser automation tool used for functional cross-browser testing. In its current version, there are 2 supported Watir drivers, Watir Classic and Watir WebDriver. There's also a driver out there that exists to drive Opera. So, what's the difference between Classic and WebDriver? Watir Classic only runs on Windows. It is the rename of the initial Watir project. It supports Internet Explorer, and it interacts directly through the DOM. Originally, it started out as being built on top of Win32 OLE, which is a Ruby gem that runs Windows applications. And it still uses that today. Watir WebDriver runs on Windows, OS X, Linux, supports the major browsers, i.e. Firefox, Chrome, Safari. It also allows you to run headless, and you can test on a mobile browser. It is built on top of Selenium WebDriver's Ruby bindings, and it uses native events, from the best I understand. Some considerations. As a Watir 3.0, it's just an initializer for which driver you're going to eventually use. And Watir 4.0, which I'm going to talk about today, allows you to choose which driver depending on which browser you declare. And the option it does is if you initialize IE, it'll run in classic mode, and if you choose anything else, it'll run with WebDriver. And the reason for this is because Selenium WebDriver for IE is not the most reliable. So the Watir team, and it's become a best practice, is to use Watir Classic for IE and WebDriver for other browsers. And the syntax is virtually the same. So, getting started. It's pretty basic. Gem install Watir. This will install the latest version of Watir and the 2 drivers. Watir Classic if on Windows, WebDriver generally. Another installation step is required, and you need to go to the Selenium download site to download a server for any other browser other than Firefox. And you'll need to put the location of that server in the path. So, the first thing you need to do is be able to start your browser. It's pretty basic. You do require Watir, then you define your browser variable, which you'll use throughout your scripts, and you just say Watir browser new. If you're on Windows, this will start IE, and if you're on anything else, it'll start Firefox. Chances are you may want to choose which browser you're going to use. So, to start IE at the very end, after the new, you'll just put an IE symbol. So this will start IE, and a Firefox symbol will start Firefox. Chrome, and I didn't go into Safari, but it's the same principle, so you'd put a Safari. So, how do you access your elements on the page? A Watir call is made up of certain parts. The first part is the browser definition. So it'll be whatever variable you've defined when you opened your browser. The second part is the element. So the element we are trying to access. Text field, h2, field set, link. Tag is the HTML tag that we're going to use to find the element. So each element has a set of tags that are applicable. I'm going to go into more detail. And then you give it a value. So this is the value of the tag that you want to find. And then you give it an action. Each element has a set of actions that are allowed. There's different ways to sort of define your element. The first one is a single element, single tag. It's pretty basic. You have a browser, the element, your tag, its value, and its action. You can also pass in a kind of looks like a hash. So you can give it two different tags for the element. So we have the browser element tag 1, its value, tag 2, its value, and the action you want to take. You can also, more likely, you're going to need to nest elements. So element 1 is its parent, and elements 2 is the child. And even within the element, the parent, each one of those elements, you can use multiple tags. So the other thing you can do is find the first tag in a container. So we have our browser, our container element, its attribute, and then you can just say whatever tag you want to find. So if you want to find...
Hey, sorry, I just had a question. The value, is that going to be like a CSS ID or class?
Yeah, depending on what you use for the tag. Most of them support CSS. So it could be ID, the ID value, a name value.
Okay. Thanks.
And so for the last one is you define your container and then you can say I want to find the first UL in an ordered list, or LI in an ordered list. So I'm going to go through all the common elements and then a couple of cool things that you can do with Watir. Text fields. This is how you access the text field. You have your browser, your text field, whatever tag you're going to use, and its value. Tags allowed are you can use ID, name, index, class, text, value, and XPath. XPath is, you can do it for everything. It's bad practice because it's very slow. And the actions you can take on a text field are set and clear. So you can set your field and you can clear it. Links. This is how you define your link. And so you can use a ID, name, index, href, class, text, value, or XPath. And the actions allowed are click. Radio buttons. You access it through a radio method. And the tags you can use are ID, name, index, class, XPath. And the actions you can use are set, clear, click, or set with a question mark, which will return true if the radio button is set, or false if the radio button is not. Checkbox. You can access it through a checkbox method, and the tags allowed are ID, name, index, class, value, XPath. And the actions you can take are click and set. Select lists. So, the way you access a select list is through a select list tag or method. And the IDs you can use to find it are ID, name, index, class, and XPath. And the actions you can take are select, which will select anything. So usually you pass in your text. So say you have a list of browser, you have a select list with a bunch of browsers in it. You can select Firefox. Or you can select the value, which means within the select fast list you have your option value and it's text. So you can say select value of 1. And another thing I forgot to list here is you can get all of the options within the select list by adding in options to the end. In general, any element can be accessed by using the HTML tag instead of the Watir defined method. Example is anchor tag instead of link. Or if you want to access field set, you would do browser field set ID or class. This is true except for input elements. For input elements, checkbox, select list, button, you're going to need to use the Watir defined class. Elements can always be accessed through XPath, though this isn't the best. And if you're going to use an index, Watir uses a zero-based indexing system. So to select the first list item in an ordered list, you would use 0, index equals 0. A word on Watir versus WebDriver syntax. The syntax between the two is for the most part uniform. If it's not, it's for something that you're not going to use all the time. So therefore it's possible to use Watir Classic to drive IE and WebDriver for other browsers. And the reason you would want to do this is because IE support for WebDrivers isn't the best. If there are variances, wait a few weeks and chances are the syntax will be merged together. Right now they're working on having Classic and WebDriver. Classic work up to the WebDriver syntax. Some advanced interactions, which you usually run across testing your browsers. The two I'm going to go over are JavaScript Pop-Ups and sending special keys. So, JavaScript Pop-Ups. Watir has an alert method that you use to interact with JavaScript Pop-Ups. So, if you want to check to see if an alert exists, you would do browser alert exists ? You can get the text of the alert by doing browser alert text. So you want to close the alert button, the dialog. You would use an OK action or a close. Both of those will close the JavaScript pop-up and the script will continue. Sometimes you're going to need to confirm, accept a confirmation JavaScript, and to do that you would just click OK. Or to cancel the confirmation, you would click close. The other thing to do is if you have a JavaScript dialog with a prompt in it, you can set the prompt value. Then you would click OK using alert.ok, or you would close it doing alert.close. There's a whole list of special keys that you can send. One example I've done is I had to clear out a text box, enter some text in. So one of the most basic ones you can do is enter. The way you do it is you do browser, in this case p, dot send keys, and then you would send a symbol for your key that you want to click. So you can do enter, mouse up, page down. There's a whole list. In the slideshow, I've linked to the entire list. And then a more advanced example is, in the second example, I'm doing Control A and then I'm deleting. So the way you do that is browser element is whatever element definition you're going to do. So a text field or a text box. Send keys. The first one is telling it to do Control All, Control A, and then deleting. For further reference, more information can be found on the Advanced Interaction section in watirwebdriver.com. This also applies for Watir. Watir Classic. So, an example. this is the gist that I do. So what we're going to do is we are going to fill out this form and submit it. So the first thing you need to do is require Watir. If you're using Ruby 1.8/7, you need to put a require Ruby gems in front of this. Then you need to define your browser using, so b equals Watir browser new. Then you need to tell the browser where to go. So the go-to method tells it to go somewhere, and then you pass in your URL as a string. So the first thing we're going to do is fill out a text field, set it Watir demo. Then we're going to fill in a text box. So within the string there's a line break value, so that'll set 2 lines. Then we're going to set the value of the radio button to set to Watir, a checkbox, a select list. We're going to select Firefox. Then we're going to submit the form. And then we're going to do a simple validation. This will return true if the page that loads is your response has been recorded. And this will also return true if the title is correct. So we've submitted our forms. This is just some further reading. There's a Watir website and a WebDriver site. The GitHub repository is pretty useful. And there's also a link to a bunch of blogs of the Watir guys that are pretty useful. So, question?
That was cool.
Matt?
Does he work with Ruby 2.0?
I have no idea.
Does he work with 1.9?
Yes, this machine is running 1.9.3.
So it should work.
Yeah.
When you use it, I assume you use it from time to time, do you have special hooks put into the web page that makes it easy to find places for it to go, or do you have to kind of like find the CSS attributes or whatever of like the checkboxes and whatnot, and then manually sort of like claw into the page?
I've worked it out with the developers that they put IDs on all of the elements on the page, because I may not know what I need to access, and ID is the best way to access anything. So that's the only special hook I have to have.
Okay, so everything's got a unique ID.
Yeah, there's ways to do it without any of those. You can use value, you can do a bunch of nested indexing. It's ugly and not very useful.
Is there a way to test for response codes? Like say you get back to 500 instead of 200?
You'd have to automatically put that in. So you would have to say, not easily, not just naturally as part of the gem. You'd have to say browser text that include 500 or, and usually you use Watir within RSpec or Cucumber. So what you'd hook into there is sort of screenshots and on fail. Patrick?
Sure, so with IE, what do you do if you're going to test newer versions of IE?
Well, usually I wait I usually wait until the Water guys say that IE supported.
Okay.
There's really, basically I just sort of load the test and run and see what happens.
Right, but with, I guess you split it up, right? There's either the classic, which does IE6, and the newer stuff, I guess, probably does newer versions of IE. Is it different versions of IE that are new, or?
I don't know IE backwards compatibility, because as Water's upgraded, we've actually upgraded the browser at work.
Okay.
So chances are, if you're using IE6 or whatever, or 7, you're going to want to go back to older versions of IE, of Water.
Okay.
Or just kill yourself.
Yeah.
Or just kill yourself. I was using, yeah. And then in terms of Firefox Updates, so there's really not a problem, but if you're stuck to Firefox 3.6 for any weird reason, it's better to use Firewater, which is a depreciated version. But anything, if you're going to test any later version of Firefox other than 3.6, use WebDriver.
How big is your test suite?
My test suite? It has about 10 specifications, and because they're not organized very well, they're about maybe 1,000 lines of code each. To test the entire application takes about an hour.
I have two questions. One is, what do you need to become a good QA engineer?
Okay.
And the second question is, how is this tool helping you on a daily basis?
So to become a good QA engineer is you really have to sort of think beyond what the specs you're given, because your job is to break the code or to sort of anticipate as much as you can problems that are going to happen based on what product management has given you, what developers are saying going to happen, because they may have gaps in your knowledge of the system that you know. So basically just learn as much as you can about the system. Even if you're testing just front-end stuff, learn how the back-end works, because my test suite also tests back-end code, so it's kind of an integration test. So I edit something in the browser and I validate that it's correct in the DB. So I know basically all of the schema that's part of the DB.
And the second question was, how does that help you on a daily basis?
Well, the test suite helps on a daily basis because regression testing an application, to do it well, takes a long time to do it manually. And the way Water helps also, since it's cross-browser, is if we supported multiple browsers, and as we open up multiple browser support, I'm only spending an hour on each browser, basically. So it speeds up regression time because there's always a push. There's never enough time for QA, so you're going to need less time to test the depth of the application. Other ways I found this useful is we had to test some web service responses. So I didn't use, oh, that's a bad example. I wasn't using Water, but I used Nokigiri to, send the call, read the XML, and just do a simple little test.
What are other products that are out there that let you do this kind of browser-based, UI-centric
Open
testing?
source?
Or anything?
Well, there's, within Visual Studio there is actually the capabilities to do this through C#. The other one is Selenium. You can use any of the bindings for Selenium WebDriver. Facebook's written a PHP version, there's a Python and Java version, I believe, and then there's the Ruby version. Another one that's kind of cool that I haven't used completely, but it's good for graphics, is called Seculi. So basically what you do is, it sort of works like browser Water, where you open up your browser, and then you define what the image is going to look like, and then you have a look for that image.
And so why this versus Selenium? Did Selenium not meet your needs? It wasn't working for the browsers you wanted to test? What was it?
Partially, the QA manager who came in had history with Water. He knew the guys who started writing it. The reason why I stay with Water is because I like the API. It's pretty simple. With Selenium, from what I've seen of the Ruby bindings, is you still kind of have a lot of executing JavaScript code. This I just say click. I don't have to say execute script. Click. Which you can do in Water if an element's being particularly difficult. But I find just this is the best. Even before you start adding in page objects, which make things very user-friendly, or Cucumber, you can kind of tell what I'm testing from the script itself. So it makes it very user-friendly.
Sounds like you're pretty plugged in with your developers, but how fickle are the tests? Like if things change on the page, or you have to go back and have to change a whole bunch of.
The only problem I've really run into is Ajax stuff. I should include that, but if you have a lot of Ajax on your page, it's better to add wait statements. So you can only. So what you can do is, if you're going to set a text field, you do browser text field, your definition, dot when present set this. So that's Ajax, like, because Water will execute stuff as soon as it sees that the browser is loaded, but the content within the page may not be loaded yet. Fickle, it can be pretty fickle. The downside of this, as opposed to sort of pointing, recorder tools, is if you're doing a recorder tool, you can go in and just reset up the recorders. With this, you actually have to go in and change the elements. So it all depends on whether the element IDs have changed. And also, I can do a talk later, but if you have your test framework, you've made it so you just have to go in and change an element definition somewhere. You don't have to go throughout the script. And it makes it easier if the path is changed.
Thanks.